Testing, testing. There's someone in chat who could let me know this is working okay, please. Oh, I can see it on my phone. Never mind. Okay. I didn't realize what time it was. I was just on my other computer. Um, Before we begin, I want to introduce you to a special guest. Um, this is Homicus. He's my wolf husband um, from a visual novel I will not be linking for various reasons. Um, but yeah, I've been waiting for him in the mail for about a month, and I got him on the 1st, and he'll be with us today. We may not be seeing him the whole time, but he's here. All right. So let me actually send the slideshow link in the Twitch chat. I need to sign in. Okay. Next. Just look at this cute boy. Hope everyone's doing well. Also, I should note that my internet's been kind of wonky lately, so if I get cut off or if I freeze for a while, that is why. Could get rid of that. Alright, so. Yeah. Oh my goodness, I'm starting late. That's okay. I was getting my tea ready to have. I think it's like a wild berry mix. Yeah, my internet's really slow, so don't be surprised if we get cut off. Copy link. Alright. And then. Alright, so it's in the chat now. Alright. Yeah, so might as well get started. This is my first lecture with Almakis here. I hope he enjoys. Alright, so today we're talking about understanding art from a meta perspective. Um, Basically, we're talking about how I'm teaching art and how you're taking in art. And again, none of the images are relevant to the text. It's just that there's a lot of text, and I want you to give something to look at. Alright, so this first slide is, do you trust me? So my qualifications for teaching this class is I was hired by LBCC and I haven't been fired, so I must be doing something right. I'm not sure what it would take me to get fired, but it hasn't happened, so thank goodness. I've been a good boy. And I have an MFA in art. I've been trained to understand art. And I wasn't. So, having an MFA doesn't mean I'm a professional teacher. You have to. There is no actual teaching like classes in order to teach this type of stuff. You just need a master's degree, which is kind of weird. I feel like there should be some kind of teacher training, but there isn't. But when I was a grad student at U of O, I did. Oh, shoot. I didn't realize I need to switch. I need to switch it to this. Okay. So, good morning, dear Kathy. So yeah, so when I got my master's degree, that immediately made me qualified to teach this class. I don't have to have any like teaching credentials or something, which is again is kind of weird. But yeah, as a grad student, I did have a little bit of training, but nothing formal. How I choose which art to show. So again, I show a lot of art that I see on Twitter, um, and most of what I show is from people that I follow, and me being a furry and me being a gay male, I tend to show a lot of things that appeal to me. So I do show a lot of gay furry art, or I should say furry art by gay male artists. Um, but I'm also, especially today, trying to include more women, more people of color. But at the same time, I don't know who is and isn't a person of color all the time when it comes to furry artists because they have avatars that aren't representative of their skin color. Um, and most of them do have he, him pronouns, but this one, for example, Sarah O, um, I believe they're she, her. Um, I think they identify as female. So I'm trying to be better at that. I am biased because I do like certain furry art, um, and I do like a lot of digital art too, which is predominantly male. I mean, yeah, yeah, it's kind of uncomfortable. Yeah, it is predominantly male space. Um, Also, more interested in what's happening now. So, yeah, I'm not super big on old art from that's like from the Renaissance era or like and honestly before I was born essentially. Not because of the time I was born that's what I'm interested in. It's just the newer the stuff, the better because I like to be stimulated with new things all the time. I don't like looking at the same thing all the time. So that's I have a bias towards that whereas in other classes you might be getting a lot of Dutch still life paintings, you know. Uh, Mostly interested in small, weird experimental things. So by that I mean I like basically weird stuff. I like stuff made by small creators instead of big studios. Um, I'm basically have the taste of what most people would consider to be a hipster. I don't mind being called a hipster. It's probably accurate. Um, so yeah, smaller, weirder things. I always tended to look towards that more than bigger budget stuff. And this last point, I'm not very good with metaphors or symbolism, so I just mostly choose things that I immediately connect with. So I don't always read deeply into art. In fact, I often don't. I kind of like what goes on the surface and sort of choosing what that means to me instead of what the artist might intend. So I kind of have a selfish reading on art, and I usually don't try to dive deep. But I know that's not for everyone. A good example is with poetry. My favorite thing to do with I have a poetry book uh, that I checked out from the library right here, and uh, I like this author, Mary Rifle. I don't know how to pronounce her name, because I could read it really quickly, and I don't have to think about symbolism. It's just like nice, pretty words, and that's fine. All right, subject position. So I talked about this in the very first lecture. So it definitely matters who I am as a person because that influences what I teach. So I'm cis male, queer, Mexican American, feminist, politically independent, etc. Um, we all gathered that, but there's other things that really inform me to who I am as a person. I think a really good example is the fact that, or is me being the son of my mom who worked at a community college in the art department where I was around artists all the time. I went to her work and met a lot of the faculty there, and that was obviously a huge influence on me because I was around art all the time. Um, my mom's job, although she was the secretary, like she had to deal with artists, and she took me to art shows and galleries, and that really influenced me in my path. I would say I'd probably be an artist anyways, just because of who I am, but it's like impossible to deny that being the son of an art department secretary, like that's definitely had a huge impact on who I am. I mean, because maybe if if my mom was all about like trying to put me into a science class or math class, things might be different. I might not be teaching art. Chances are I probably would be doing art because I kind of failed out of biology because it's really hard. But that was a huge, again, that was a huge impact that I had. Also, lower middle class ish. So I'm gonna talk about this more, but yeah, I had access to art growing up. I wasn't burdened with having to like work all the time to support family as a young father or anything like that. So there was time for me to make art, um, go see art shows, experience art, think about art, etc. And there's a lot more that goes into this. Like again, this is. I'm pretty sure this artist is queer, but it's furry art. It appeared on my timeline. I love. Uh, I'm, I don't know what animal that is. Probably a hybrid, raccoon, something else. Eating pizza. I love it. It's really cute. So yeah, everything that I am, as far as my identity and background, that influences how I'm going to teach art and and what subject matter I'm going to pick and my biases towards what I want to teach, what artists I want to show, right? Because I'm not going to show artists that I don't like or that I find are really boring. I'm going to show what I like because that's the most interesting to me. And I found out that teaching this class for the first time, teaching stuff that I'm really into and I'm passionate about is much more interesting than textbook examples. Um, the first time I taught this, I was teaching textbook examples because I was not prepared for this class. Um, it was pretty awful and terrible, and everyone could tell that I wasn't into what I was teaching. And so, around week 3 or 5 or something like that, I changed everything, and the class became much better. So, yeah, everything about the way you learn about art has a bias. And there's no such thing as complete objectivity about art. Everything's subjective. Who you are is a huge thing, and we'll go into more detail. Okay, so let me get a drink of water. Just take a look at Amicus, or a drink of tea, rather. Okay, so this is a statement we need to think about when we're learning about art. The art history we learn in the US generally favors English speaking, white, upper middle class, straight men. So that is a very loaded statement, and I know that might be a little bit weird or uncomfortable to hear, but that's completely true, and we'll talk about it. Um, we're going to go this bit by bit. So, English speaking. Okay. So, that's kind of obvious why we would learn about English speaking cultures more often. It's because we speak English in the US. Most of us are monolingual, unfortunately. And so we're going to tend to understand English speaking art and English speaking cultures a lot more because we speak the same language, obviously. But what comes along with that is we understand the nuances of language, we understand meaning, we know through historians and such the meaning behind these things because there's a lot of similarities in between different English speaking cultures, right? So when it comes to non English speaking cultures, there's a lot lost in translation because there's a lot of nuance in the language, in the culture that we don't understand, and that can't be translated to English perfectly. Um, there's a lot of Japanese and German phrases that don't have literal translations to English. And so, of course, we're going to tend to gravitate towards what we understand. And once something becomes something we don't understand, we have to be a lot more careful about how we interpret it, because we have to learn a lot more about that culture, about that language, in order to understand without misinterpreting intentions, which is a huge problem with translations. Is uh, yeah, yeah. I had a friend who's a translator, and he talked about translating from Spanish to English, and how it's not just translating language word to word, um, exactly as it is, because a lot of us has probably tried Google Translate and it's very messy. So it's not just when translating, it's not just grammar, it's the cultural context as well. Uh, So there's a so my friend talked about translating um, Mexican folklore tales into English, and it wasn't only providing the exact word definitions. It was about researching the culture that it came from, the specific state, the specific um, like tribe or whatever. He was the tale came from. So there's a lot that goes into translation that's a huge barrier for a lot of English speakers. And I can't remember his name, but I think it was the director of Parasite said, um, to people who don't watch foreign films, um, like once you get over the 1 inch barrier of subtitles on the screen, you'll be open to a lot more culture. Um, and I think that's great, and it's completely true. That doesn't include the fact that you do need more context that you might not understand, but watching the movie will provide you with more context than, like, say, just a book, for example. Okay, here's a cute rat. White. So, so white's kind of a weird term because we can't have like a perfect definition of who white people are, because even Middle Eastern people are, their race is white. On forms, I'm white. My race, my ethnicity is Hispanic slash Latino, but on like official government forms, my race is white. But when I step out into the world, I'm not seen as a white person. I'm seen as a brown person. So it's kind of a weird definition, but within the context of art, we mean European, mostly Western European, and a lot of that comes from art history. Um, like a lot of art history is written in Europe, because that's where most of art history we can understand, because like English speaking, that's where it comes from. And the second fact is every textbook that I have seen, like without exception, um, I mean, with the exception of focusing on people of color, like the artists are overwhelmingly white. And this is a thing where, like, this isn't my perception, it's literally the case. Like, the numbers show that most artists that are being shown are white. Okay. But there's also the more subjective side of it, of racism, of not showing people of color, probably because um, like white culture is more familiar to historians. There's definitely people like Basquiat who are Basquiat was a black painter, and he's revered in the art world, but he's kind of like a token of the art world. sadly. And I was actually reading about an article about an article how one of the museums like did a Basquiat exhibition and it was extremely whitewashed and ignored the cultural context or whatever. Um, but yeah, it's like obviously racism is a thing, and people of color aren't nearly given enough chances to exist in a predominantly white art world, and it's obviously like awful. Like more diversity is better. It enriches everyone's experiences by far. But of course, some people don't want to give up power, so that's a thing. Um, and yeah, there are nuances and exceptions. Like I talk like Basquiat, and one of the most surprising exceptions is Carol Walker, who does a lot of art specifically about slavery and blackness. And again, she's one of the token people in the art world. Her work is super powerful and it's awesome, and I'm glad that it's been accepted into this predominantly white art world because we need more of that. But yeah, again, like it's overwhelmingly white, which is unfortunate, but it's also a symptom of systemic racism of giving people privilege, white people privilege over people of color because people of color tend to have accents and that's seen as undesirable or dirty or not pure. Um, I was gonna say, see, I put this sentence. I won't go further into it because I don't want to become flustered. Obviously, I have a stake in this because I'm a person of color. I've been called like a terrorist many times, even by my own family members. Thankfully, not my mom or Jacob who are here, but like some of my cousins would make fun of me for having a beard, saying I look Middle Eastern, therefore a terrorist. Like whatever. It's not whatever because like that's a thing. Like walking down the street, sometimes I get weird stares by white people, um, and if like that happens on a day to day basis, like that kind of says a lot about how people of color are treated. If you're different, like you're not treated fairly. So it's a huge problem, obviously, and thank goodness we had the demonstrations last year to sort of highlight the injustice that especially black people have to deal with day to day. And that doesn't even touch the surface of what happens. Um, so I should probably move on because this is a long lecture, I think. Upper middle class. So this is a huge and complicated thing because generally poor people are not going to be seeing art as much because again the example I gave is if I was working two jobs I probably wouldn't have the time to go to art galleries. Art is a risky field to study in because it's not as certain as biology or even business, right? If you're studying art, you have to have some sort of privilege because you're most likely not going to get a job like that. It took me 2 years to get this teaching job after grad school, which kind of sucks. Like after grad school, it took me a couple years to get a job in my field. Um, yeah, it's bad, but also like the fact that a lot of art galleries are in bigger cities, are in like more wealthy parts of town rather than like inner center, like as opposed to inner city neighborhoods, right? Because art's a privilege. Not art's not like a necessity like food or water, and not everyone has the means to access that. Like if you're worrying about where your next meal is coming from, who cares about a gallery show that's happening? Where most of the people are going to be, middle class, white, drinking wine, being hoity toity, whatever. So yeah, art is a huge privilege, and which is extremely unfortunate. But I'm also bringing a lot of art in this class that isn't necessarily privileged. As long as you have an internet connection, you can look at all the art that I'm showing. I have the links to the Twitter handles that you can look their art up. Sam Gilliam is a black man, by the way. So yeah, is art is for everyone. However, art when taught in institutions like this generally tend to elevate like high art, like paintings basically made for upper middle class people. Like that's what's most commonly talked about, this kind of stuff. um, you don't really hear much about like other cultures, about like common workers like pottery and stuff. That's not nearly as valuable as like a genius artist like Picasso or whatever, because there's that privilege, right? And only usually it's only accessible to people who have money, or even just middle class people, but not really lower class people, right? And of course, only upper class people can afford these expensive works of art. Like a lot of artists are lower middle class, except for the trust fund babies, of course. Um, and yeah, my peers probably couldn't afford to purchase their own artworks that they put in galleries, which says a lot. That's really messed up. Um, I all of my art I give away for free. I refuse to take money for it. So I try to be different in that sense, but and there's a lot of artists who do that, obviously. But yeah, like the art that most art history will talk about privileges these artworks that are accessible only in museums or galleries that are meant for middle class and upper class people. Straight, so this is obviously a huge issue as well. 90% of the population is straight, so there's obviously an inequality between straight and queer people, um, which proportionally, I guess, makes sense, but also, like, obviously, us queer people are discriminated against. Like, there's laws saying we can't do things that heterosexual people can do, which is obviously really stupid and it doesn't make any sense. Um, and yeah, we're seen as outsiders. So I would say the art world is generally more welcoming towards queer people than people of color, though, because queer people can be white and they can be upper middle class, and sometimes class solidarity is bigger than like queer solidarity. Like for example, Ellen, like hanging out with George Bush a year ago, I think it was, like she's gay, but she's hanging out with a homophobic, racist asshole. Like that doesn't make any sense, right? So like class solidarity is a thing. Ellen's just an asshole in general. There's a lot going on around that, and I know she addressed it, about her not being fair to workers, but okay, I'm gonna move on. Um, surprised if people at that would be surprised that I don't like Ellen. Yeah, of course not. Um, okay. Anyways, so men. All right. So this has been addressed for a long time. I think this poster's from the 80s. Do women have to be naked to get into the Met Museum? And there's statistics about like how males and females are represented unfairly. Here's some statistics. Like obviously this is a huge issue. Obviously there's a huge gender inequality. There's been so many studies and so many reportings of women being treated unfairly, in the workplace and everywhere. Men are obviously in power. Um, it's obviously super unfair and it's stupid. But of course, men are selfish and don't want to give up their power. Um, and yes, I'm saying this as a cis male who identifies as a um, masculine presenting male. Like, I know I have privilege as a male, but what am I going to do about it? I think the important thing for that I can do is to address these issues, to speak up about these issues. If you're a woman, you probably know all this stuff. This is old news. There's a lot of like inequalities, like rape reportings aren't being taken seriously because women aren't believed, and women are seen as like gossipy and mouthy and not to be trusted by men, which is BS. Like men are just okay. All right. I'm getting like really angry thinking about this, but um, if you're a man, especially if you're a cis male, um, seriously talk to women about the kind of stuff they have to go through, and believe them, believe the words they say, because women aren't believed as much as they should be. So like talk about women's experiences and how they felt being a woman, and how it feels like being seen as a woman instead of a person, and being seen as a sex object instead of a person. As a man, that might happen to you, but it 100% guarantee it does not happen as nearly as it does to women. So again, if you're a cis male, please talk to women about this. Understand their experiences about this, and and hopefully it'll illuminate the injustices and inequalities that happen. And and the reason I'm specifically saying this about women right now is because a lot of you are living in Lynn County, where you probably don't encounter as many people of color or as many queer people. But the same thing applies to people of color, to lower class people, and to queer people. Like, talk to them about their experiences of feeling inferior to straight white cis males. Like, how does that make them feel? Try to see from their perspective the kind of things that happen that make us feel like less people, less than human, right? Because it happens, and if you don't believe that this happens, seriously, just talk to people about their experiences and how it makes them feel. Because like there's nothing to lose from gaining empathy and really understanding other people, because it'll enrich your experience as a human being and help you understand people and love people better. And that's the most important thing I want to teach in this class is like be compassionate and love people. Don't push away what you don't understand. Here's I think well, you can watch this on YouTube, but this is I think from the 70s, from a program called Ways of Seeing by John Berger, which talks about how women are depicted in art. This is from a white, straight, cis male perspective on women, and he talks about like, oh yeah, like women are represented unfairly. Like they're mostly seen as objects, as nudes, not as people. So if you have half an hour, it's definitely worth watching. All right, so change of subject real quick. This is a communication process. So this is a oversimplified model of how we communicate with each other. If I didn't mention it, I'm pretty sure I did on the first day that I have a minor in human communication. I mostly got it because I've always been a super awkward person, and learning about human communication helped me understand other people more clearly. Also, I'm on the spectrum, and so I haven't understood more normal people, neurotypical people as well, until I started taking human communication classes. So that's why I did that, and it was super helpful. All right, so communication process. So the encoding, this first part, which is me, in this case, me speaking this class, this is me speaking. This is what I know. Like my biases, this is what's called encoding, where my thoughts, my knowledge, my memory, what I have in my head, this is how I'm communicating to you, which is through speaking, through this mic, through this slideshow, etc. Again, someone like other people have, like if this was someone else in this same exact chair, they would have their own method of encoding if they're teaching the same exact class. It's pretty much the same because we're all trying to speak English, right? Because that's the only language I understand, and that's the only language like that I can teach on here. So that encoding is in English, and I'm speaking it. All right. So the communication media is a slideshow and this live stream or video that you're watching. So I'm not talking to you in person. That would be a different communication media. That is what it is. And then noise is the interference between that. So stuff such as, well, if my internet connection goes down, that's noise. If your internet connection's slow, if you're getting interrupted by your doggy or your rat, that's noise. If you're not understanding how I'm phrasing things, if I'm saying a lot in my presentation, which I'm sure I do, that's noise. And that sort of scrambles the message that I'm trying to give and makes it less perfect, which is obviously not the goal. The goal is to reduce as much noise as possible so we can have as close of a understanding of meaning, as close as we can to each other. And decoding is you, who I'm speaking to right now. And this is how you interpret the messages that I'm giving. So basically there's a lot of obstacles between what I need to teach and what's in my thoughts, and then you taking that in and understanding it. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on there that doesn't make art history or art in general like perfectly understandable. Okay. And you have your biases as well. So these are questions that you do want to consider. Like how much, because this is especially important for this class since most of you are not art students, or art majors, I should say. There's a lot of you in like business or agriculture or kinesiology or whatever. So think about the influence that your family has had. What kind of art have they shown you? Have they not shown you any art? Is it mostly art of landscapes? Is it mostly art of puppies? Is it mostly just movies? Have you been to galleries? Have you been to museums? And that plays into the next part. Like, what kind of art did you see around your neighborhood? Were there galleries around your neighborhood where you grew up, or where you are? Or were there not? Did you have to travel far to the city where you had to take a bus because you didn't have a car, and that takes a lot of time and money? Have you purposely sought out art? Like, do you look at art on Twitter? Do you look at art on Instagram? Or do you only look at art when it comes across? Or are you only in this class because you have to take it? Which is valid, by the way. Like, if you're not wanting to take this class, that's completely fine. I'm not mad at that. Also, like, do you watch documentaries? Do you read books? And yeah, and this last point is, how is this class going to change your perception on art? How are you going to see art after this class? Hopefully you'll be more illuminated and you'll enjoy art a little bit deeper than before. Okay, so I would argue the most important concept to think about is, what do you personally want from art? And that is, you only get out of art what you put into it. So as I say on this next slide, we're going to discuss this a little bit more next week. But essentially what I'm trying to say is, what do you want to get out of art? You're not going to have a fun time in art if you're miserable learning about it, right? So think about what kind of stuff you like art for, or what you're willing to learn. Like, if you're never willing to read into an artist statement, for example, you might not learn that much, and you might call it art crap until you learn about it. But if you're not going to try to learn about it, you might just call it crap and leave it at that. And that kind of sucks. You're not giving art a chance. Sometimes you just don't have the energy for that, and that's me too. Um, I hope I don't get a lot of crap for this, but I don't really care about anime very much. I My ex boyfriend tried to like watches a lot of anime, so I try to get into it, and I don't care, honestly. Sorry. I think it's fine, but I just don't like the style, and I don't like series. Like I also don't want to watch TV because a bunch of shows like that are half an hour where you have to watch 12 of them for a long storyline. I don't have the time for that. I just want to watch videos on insects and skateboarding and play video games and make art. Like I don't want to watch some drama. I don't care, whatever. But at the same time, like that's my prerogative. Like I don't care if anyone else does. I'm glad those things exist and people can watch those things. So, um, yeah, what I want out of art is going to be different than what you want out of art, and everyone has their own individual reasons for wanting to look at art or to not want to look at art, and they're all valid. But I would say that being a jerk about it is less valid. Like if you're not going to try, like don't say anything. I think that's the biggest problem with the internet is like just talking about negative opinions that don't need to be said. I mean, if you have opinions where you can have constructive criticism of something you don't like, that's different than just bashing on something. Like that just sucks. Give a reason on why you don't like something, and don't be a jerk about it. Be compassionate and loving. So here's a video that I do want you to watch. It is a TLDR. That means too long didn't read. That just means like a summary. So this is, if you don't have the time to watch this, it's only an hour, or even less than an hour. I personally purposely made this lecture shorter so you can watch the two videos I'm showing here. Yeah, this is basically a summary of this, and then this is a really great perspective on art history by a woman of color. In this, she and this other woman are created this blog / whatever called The White Pube. It's a play on the phrase the white cube, which means like basically like the gallery world that I'm talking about that privileges white heterosis males. It's a play on that. So there's I'm gonna click on here. So yeah, it's a very long article. However, it has a link to a SoundCloud file right here where you can just press play, and it's 18 minutes and 40 seconds, and she'll just read her words out loud, and it's pretty awesome. So yeah, let me go back to that. So let me go to just me and my husband Amicus. So yeah, I actually went through that pretty quickly. But yeah, I think it's really important to understand where the source of your information is coming from. So your source of information is coming from me, Daniel P. Lopez, and Amicus here. I'm different than anyone else who teaches this class, like by far, because I think the other people teaching this class are white women, if I remember correctly. I know Isabel is. And yeah, she's going to teach, like Isabel, for example, who's head of art history, like she's super into, I think 17th century Dutch still life paintings. And I'm not, but the way she talks about them, like she has a lot of passion towards them. And so like, you can't help but get excited about 17th century Dutch still life paintings, like, which sounds really weird and specific, but it's a thing. And yeah, I don't care about it other than when she's talking about it. And that's why I teach about, or I show a lot of like gay furry art, is because I love it. They're cute animals. They're fun. I love animals in general. I have a ton of animal plushies on my bed, and I have a ton of Beanie Babies on my shelf, and I have pets, that are animals. So yeah, I have a lot of biases. Um, Even when I was being taught art history when I was in your position, there was things I didn't like hearing about, and I would just like not care about. But there's things that excited me, and definitely, if there's things that you're interested in, then yeah, let me know, and I can talk more about that. And as a class, like for the class, I will have a pull on a couple subjects to choose from for the last class or two. But yeah, I'm rambling because I love talking about this kind of thing. It's important to examine your own biases and what matters to you and what you're going to learn, what filter you're seeing things through. So, again, you're learning, understanding art through my lens, nobody else's. So, keep that in mind. So, I'm hoping that you do enjoy my lectures. If not, that's understandable because I am a very, very um, intense person when it comes to these things. I'm a soft boy, but I am very intense, obviously. All right, so that's it for today. Shorter lecture than usual, so go watch those videos if you can. I don't like homework, but we're not going to watch a video for this lecture. That doesn't make sense. So, again, thanks for showing up. Love you, and enjoy the rest of your day if you choose to. Bye.